great. Congratulations for being a part of the Seven Faces of Jane.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Just recently premiered at the Bentonville Film Festival. How did you feel about that?
It was a really great screening, the film. I love the Bentonville Film Festival, that they really have this focus on having diverse voices. And it was great to see, a crowd's reaction. We kind of make these things in our basement, so to say. So it's really nice to put it out in the world and see people connect. And, we get a chance to feel heard. And, who doesn't like being listened to, right?
Well, that's the reason why you became a filmmaker. That is for sure.
Yeah.
So tell us how you got involved in the Seven Faces of Jane. They just reached out to you on this case?
Yeah. So Roman and I worked together at his company, working on some short form projects, the Directors Bureau. So we had this fairly new relationship together, but he called me when he had this idea for the film, and invited me to participate. And I think the thing that really got me was, he said, I want you to be able to do whatever you want. And who doesn't want to make a film project, which is, whatever you want to do, you can do it. And he's like, but what's really important to me is, that this is specifically you. I want to hear your voice, what's interesting to you. And of course, I wanted to participate in that.
So what obviously on a project like this, he has to establish some kind of rules.
Yeah.
Because there has to be some kind of consistency. What rules specifically did he actually say, okay, you have to include this into your short film?
Yeah. So there, of course, with any film, there's limitations. Time and money is an obvious one, right? We only had a couple of days, but he wanted to make this film with this exquisite corpse idea. So we'd each make our own segment of the film, not knowing what the other directors were doing. And then there was this sort of game element of it. We each drew a card. There was a story beat, there was a location, and there was a where we are, what segment we are in the film, and that kind of coincided with our schedule, our shooting schedule, I believe, if I remember correctly. So I drew the fifth segment, and I actually lucked out for the story beat. I had a wild card, so I had some freedom there to choose. And then the location was a neighborhood. And I was really excited. I was really excited about that. It felt like the universe was speaking to me. I think my neighborhoods growing up have really been on the front of my mind and influenced me to be who I am today. I think about them a lot. So it was a great thing to be able to draw those cards and to have those parameters for how we shoot our segments.
So in reality, you kind of know what the project was about. It wasn't like a complete surprise. He kept it secret or none of that.
Yeah, I mean, we knew to some degree, and Roman really worked with us and was open to give us feedback on our ideas and share, kind of what in general the film was about. It was about Jane dropping off her daughter at camp, and then going on this sort of journey of self-exploration. So we knew that, but we didn't know what journey each of the director's segments, what was happening in their journeys. We didn't know that. So we also, said things really small things. I think one thing that Roman and I talked about, I think he was, I remember we had a Zoom call and he was out shooting with Wes Anderson's new film that he had written, and our times were all off. I think it was nighttime in Spain where he was, and it was daytime here, and we were talking about the film. He says, you know, one thing to think about with your segment is like you're fifth in the segment. He's like, you know, I imagine she's probably gone through some things, and she's probably made some self-discovery. So like think about that as you're incorporating you know, these story elements into your segment. So it was sort of vague. But overall, you know, I think those little bits of information sort of did help, right, in creating our stories.
All right. Well, let's talk about your segment. I believe it's called Rose. Where did you came up with this idea?
Yeah. So you know, there was a time in my life that I moved back with my parents, who were at the time living with my grandmother, and we lived in this tiny 2-bedroom house. I shared a bedroom with my sisters, and you know, my parents slept in the living room. And we early in my life, we lived in sort of maybe not the best neighborhood in Bakersfield, California. Actually, it actually was the worst neighborhood in Bakersfield, California. And we got out though, you know, and I spent my high school years in a different place. And then, you know, I felt like pushed back into this neighborhood when I lived with my grandmother, because it was back into that neighborhood I didn't want to be in. And it just made me think about those feelings of what it's like to be with my grandma. And also it's like, gosh, have I gotten past this? Or also I think I was trying to hide my culture. You know, I didn't want to be Latino. I didn't want to be looked at as different. So that's kind of where the start of the film was, you know, where the beginnings of the idea. And I remember my partner and I, Katie, working on that, talking about it. And I had this idea. I was like, well, maybe Jane like stumbles onto a quinceañera, something that like really represents like who I am. And I remember as a kid hating going to quinceañeras and hating going to dance with these strangers, because I was always like roped in to go be in a quinceañera of my mom's friend or my aunt's friend with a bunch of strangers. And I really hated it. And then I think it was actually my partner's like, well, what if Jane, instead of stumbling on the party, what if the girl comes to Jane? You know, what if she's run away? And I was like, oh, that's it. And then it just, and sort of it blossomed from there. Yeah, and it is like, you know, very much like Rose, and I felt these feelings of, you know, how close can I be to my culture? You know, I feel very different. I don't speak Spanish. You know, I kind of like hear it from both sides. Like I'm not Latino enough, and I'm definitely not, you know, white. So I think, you know, that's kind of where the story came from. It's like that awkward feeling of like not knowing exactly where you fit in.
Wow. And you're a Central Valley boy too. So I'm calling you from Fresno right now. So.
Oh, there you go. Sister city, basically, right?
Very, very similar cities.
Yeah.
So when you got that neighborhood, what neighborhood did you film this in? What was this like in Los Angeles, maybe like East LA or something?
Yeah, it was exactly. Yeah, it was in Boyle Heights. But I imagined it in my head as being Bakersfield, right? I mean, I didn't really present that in the story. I didn't want to try to tell that story like, hey, we're shooting in Bakersfield, or this was shot in Bakersfield. But that's what I imagined. Going to a place like the market that I went to all the time as a kid. And again, like, oh gosh, why do I have to go to the Mercado Latino? Like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to go there. And now as an adult, I've really have come back. It's come full circle now. It's like, I want to be a part of my culture. This is like makes up who I am. And you know, the world has changed as well. There's more space, I think. And now it's like I love to be in those places. I love to go there. I love to have the food and hear the music and shop in those places. So yeah, I always imagined in my mind like, oh, this is just like home.
Yeah, that neighborhood in Los Angeles is a terrific neighborhood, especially the Mercado over there. That is for certain. Now, so everybody used the same actress, Julian, throughout, you know, obviously being the seven faces of Jane. How did you want to approach her, you know, on playing this version of Jane?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I feel like I'm this kid who I grew up as this kid, and even now as an adult, you know, I want the surprise. Like on Christmas, I could never imagine shaking a present or feeling it because I wanted there to be a surprise. So when I approached my segment of the film, I wanted to consider some things like, oh yeah, maybe she's been on this journey, like we talked about, but also I wanted to imagine that my film was the only film that was being shot. So I didn't want to try to guess and what kind of character Jane is in the other films. I just wanted her to be uniquely her in this film. So, and that was somebody that, you know, also embodies very many characteristics of my own as an adult, of someone that also, you know, has a hard time thinking about themselves and where they fit in, and considering their feelings in the moment and being present in those things. So yeah, you know, I really tried to just imagine my version of Jane only.
Well, it's almost nearly like fish out of water type of story.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess the main piece of your short film, obviously, it's not Julian, but it is the character Rose, which is played. You could correct me. Daniela Hernandez.
Yes.
Could you talk about you know, casting her into this role?
Yeah.
And how you wanted her to play this.
Yeah, that was a very scary thing, casting, right? Because it's just two characters, and I knew Gillian was going to crush it, and we looked around, we auditioned some people, we actually chased after a few people that were names, had shows or movies or something that were recognizable, and we actually got, you know, a decent response. Not everybody that we hoped to get were available, but I remember there were a couple of people. It's like, oh yeah, this person's currently on a show. You know, people are gonna recognize this person. Should I cast this person? I don't know. It just doesn't quite fit. And I kept going back to Danny's audition, and she crushed it in the audition. It was really great. There's no doubt about that. And some of it is about the look too, like recognizable. You know, for me, in my personal, I was really diving deep in my own sort of personal experience. So I wanted to keep going down that road. And I remember there was one point where I almost made the choice to go with somebody else. And then I went back and I looked at Danny, and I just thought, you know, if somebody took a family photo of me and my sisters, like, and Danny just snuck in, they probably think that she was still part of our family. You know, it was like reminded me so much of one of my sisters, and looked like she could fit in. And I thought, wow, you know, if I do that, I think that I can tap into that sort of very familiar emotion that I have from like the younger version of myself. And, you know, so I went with Danny, and she crushed it. I mean, I think she did so well. and I love still, watching her go in our film. I think one of my favorite moments in the film actually is, without giving away too much, they're on the rooftop, and Jane yells out into the world, and Danny closes her eyes. She's shocked by it, and which was a really very real moment. She was really surprised, and just seeing like that little moment of like, of, being herself and being surprised and being a kid, and it was really beautiful. I think she did such a great job.
That is terrific. Well, one more thing about your production. Talk about that dress that he had to wear for this.
Yeah, that the dress. Oh my gosh, the quinceañera dress it's got to be fabulous, right? And so ornate, and that's like there's no other way, right? Like to do a quinceañera right, and to have like a fabulous giant dress. And because I was down the road in production, I was shooting Fifth. I was definitely working with a crew that were racing around, trying to make everything happen. And I remember our stylist was really looking hard for a dress, and sending me tons of pictures, and it's like, oh yeah, this one, maybe not this one, maybe I don't. And I had this idea of this light colored blue dress, but it was tough. They were in the garment district in LA, and just searching, and while finishing production, while they were shooting a different segment, and then racing down there to try to find this dress, but they found it. And that's what it's got to be, and it really represents, in the story for Rose, it really represents like an old tradition, right? That she's like, oh, how do I be myself? And like, if I have to keep being reminded of this old way of life that I don't want to be a part of. What was, I don't want to give away too much, but I think that she figures out how to do it, which is cool.
I know, and I was going to say poor shoes in the case yeah. So for you to wrap things up, what's next on the plate for you? Are you sticking around in the short film world, or are you actually going to go into a full feature?
Yeah, so I have several projects that I'm working on. I'm attached to this feature called Upriver. It's this blacklist script that a friend of mine wrote, Antonio Macia. It's about these kids who go on this journey up the LA River from Compton to Los Feliz to return a stolen ring. Really beautiful piece. A bunch of Latino kids, and I love that idea of adventure. And I'm also working on this film Aberdeen with a friend of mine, Matt Sheehy, and it's a film about this musician who is grieving from the death of his mother, and like dealing with his own mortality, and quits music and moves up to Aberdeen, Washington to become a forester, and runs into his crazy neighbor who might have opened a portal to another dimension. So really fun, like grounded sci-fi piece. And then I'm working on one other project about Bakersfield, this musician who's moves home to Bakersfield, California to save his music career and become the next Buck Owens, but has to move in with his grandma and his family. And his family are these Mormons, and it's just like a very personal story. So there's a handful of things that I'm working on, and so we'll be moving into the feature stuff.
Now, before I let you go, because you mentioned Bakersfield
Yes.
several times, but
yes.
but you know, it's because I grew up in the Central Valley,
Yeah.
and so on, and there's not much of an entertainment industry
No.
per se. So
No.
how did the direction of your life entered into this industry? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously something, you know, kind of like sparked that.
Yeah. You know, I've always appreciated art to some degree. I think there's a tape of me as a little kid where my mom is an audio tape recording me talking, and she says, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, an artist. And you know, I didn't really explore that as a kid. A little bit, you know, when I was a teenager, I started playing in bands, old punk rock, terrible pop punk rock bands. And then when I was in college, you know, my dad worked as an oil field in the oil fields in Bakersfield, and they didn't go to college, so didn't really, we didn't know what to do about college. But I started college, moved to Utah. It's actually where I live now, and I really just read the back of the catalog. It's like, what would be interesting? And film seemed interesting, and you know, I started studying film. I think it was my fourth major, after having crisis after crisis of like, oh my gosh, I can't study business. I can't pass Econ 110, or you know, I can't study communications. Like, I hate to write so much. Surprise, surprise, I have to write a lot as a filmmaker. But you know, I remember going to that class. That first film class, and it's like it clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the universe telling me this is what I need to do. But I started late. I think I took my first film class at age 26, and it's been a journey.
It most certainly is, and I want to thank you for doing this, because I could tell everything you do, you try to add that personal touch to it. So keep on telling these stories, because
yeah, thank you.
More of those. So Julian, thank you very much for speaking to us about the seven faces of Jane, especially your segment called Rose. Everyone should definitely check it out, especially more stuff from you in the future.
Please do. Yeah, keep in touch. I mean, I always love to interact with people, and you know, you obviously like following me on social media and things of that sort. I love to be involved in the community. So
yeah, most definitely. I will keep in touch. Some of us from the Central Valley must stick together somehow.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
we do this again next time.
All right.